Good afternoon, everybody joining me there. This beautiful afternoon on Let's Pop with Irutan. Hope you're doing better. It's your girl, the lovely Irutan here today. It's always a great time to be alive. Thank you guys for joining me live on TikTok. Remember, you can share and invite more people to have amazing, uplifting conversations. It's always about redefining Africans as we redefine ourselves. It's another great week to basically start over. I always say you can always come back from anything because you are the change you need to see in the world. Follow us on all the social media platform on YouTube, on X, on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and also on the radio network. You can download our app on Google Store for amazing uplifting conversation. On the app, also on the star section, click connect and at the tab will appear the BHFN Sports Store section. In there, you'll basically find amazing healthy supplements which will help you in regards to the guys who are working out, the ladies on their journey to grow their hair, and also if you want to have a beautiful, amazing, glowing skin or basically stronger nails, you'll definitely find all the supplements on the app. I hope you all have a beautiful weekend. I hope you rested well, spend time with family, rejuvenate and revitalize because you know what? Rest and basically start over in regards to anything that you're working towards. Thank you for coming in on basically tuning in on the best radio station, the Black Butterfly Network. Today we're going to talk about a very major conversation, beautiful topic here on the Black Butterfly Radio. The topic is why is the US government trying to censor African media? That's the conversation of the day. We'll dive in deeper in this topic because if you ask yourself, why is the US government trying to censor the African media? Mostly here in Africa. Sometimes they're trying to Googling things here and bring the right information the way it's supposed to be, and someone else maybe who's in the States, they try and go and basically Google and research and that information, it's totally like two different information that are definitely presented to you. We understand also we're going to talk about the fact that um, the Africa, or basically Africa, was not even a seat at the UN Security Council, which they're basically doing that right now. Why? After 80 years, they're basically giving the Africa, or basically giving Africa seat on the UN Security Council, and basically it's just for them to be there. We do not have a leader who's representing us at the UN Security Council. Why is that? We'll also dive in deeper into the conversation, the topic that I've basically mentioned right now. Why is the US government trying to censor African media? And also the American condition. This is going to go deeper by a good, amazing individual who gives more information about that. We're going to start in that so that we can basically go back to understanding why is the US government censoring a lot of information. Basically, the African media, I understand there's a lot we need to know. And basically, we're supposed to be conditioned in regards to not knowing anything that's happening, not knowing about our African history, African identity, not knowing anything that is happening because, as we all know, if Africa's doors is basically closed down, all other nations will go bankrupt. They won't survive. They find all the mineral resources through our resources in Africa. They're basically getting richer as we're getting poorer. That's always been the thing. But let's start with that conversation before we dive into the main topic.
Well, I say our people, and I say our countries with regards to the Muslims and the Muslim lands, because I'm a Muslim. The history of the Muslims is my history. The Muslims are my family. That's my nation. The Ummah is my nation. Being American isn't a citizenship, it's a condition. And once you realize that you have that condition,
Say something powerful. Being American is not a citizenship, it is a condition.
you can spend the rest of your life trying to recover from it. It's like PTSD. You have American dissonance syndrome. And if you reach adulthood and you're still patriotic, you have the most profound case of Stockholm syndrome imaginable because that society has deeply wronged you. I mean, when you say that someone is an American, basically you're saying that they were an abused child, psychologically abused, emotionally abused, mentally abused, educationally abused, and abused in every other kind of way. You've been lied to.
That is true. I can basically second that. But the main conversation, why is there is government censoring, trying to censor African media? There's a lot that, as African people, first of all, number one is not even the media, it's the fact that we're not taught about a lot of things in regards to our history. And also from friends and also associates who are in the States, they're not really taught about the African history. What they're taught is super surfaced and super, I can say, shady, everything to do with Africa, which is not it. And I believe if we understand who we are, if we know what's going on, if we're able to really find our minds of, as Africans, and a lot of information for us to help us understand who we are is in the internet. So why is the US government trying to censor African media? Because they know if we know who we are, if we start researching a lot of things that we see online in the internet concerning their government, their resources, who they really are, where that their agendas, their plans about the future, the VCINs and everything to do with that. The Jays were basically controlling the media. We'll wake up and basically take back our power without even asking for it.
You've been programmed with dysfunction. Your intellect has been systematically degraded. Your intellectual and your moral depth has been deliberately depleted to make you shallow. Cognitive dissonance has been inflicted on you your whole life. When you say American, you may just as well say damaged or victimized. You come from a country that has a fabricated national identity around a set of values and principles it never, ever applied anywhere. And in fact, more often than not, only ever applied the opposite. You live in a country that is demonstrably and obviously an authoritarian oligarchy, but which you have been taught since childhood is a democracy. No one living in America today has lived under any administration that wasn't guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity, committed both abroad and on domestic soil. And you've been brainwashed into thinking that your country stands for freedom and justice. It's sick. Your education system is based on the Prussian system of indoctrination to turn every student into an obedient conformist slave to power. But you pretend that your society cherishes individuality. They've done nothing but damage you. Your schools have damaged you. Your media has damaged you. Your entertainment, your fake history, your
I say the media has definitely damaged a lot of people. The entertainment industry damaged a lot of people, and also our history has basically damaged a lot of people. Not our history as African, but what is being pushed to be studied in school. That's not it. Everything that we're learning, everything that we've been learning, is not the main thing that we should know about who we are.
myths, your government have done nothing but damage you all your life. That's what it means to be an American. And part of that damage, one aspect of that relentless damage, is in the question itself. You're a white American, you said. That matters to you. And you force it to matter to everyone in that country, even though it's an actually completely irrelevant characteristic. But because of the way that you have developed as a so called society, you made it relevant and you made it an issue and you insist on keeping it an issue. So you can never escape. I don't even get to make it irrelevant to me because of the racial history in America. The whole context of race in the United States is a self perpetuating death spiral that never dies. You assign value to all of these characteristics that are actually the least valuable characteristics that a human being can have. I mean, why race? Why skin color and not eye color or hair color? Why not height? It's incredibly arbitrary and stupid. But you did what you did. You drew the lines where you drew the lines, and you sentenced whole segments of humanity to imprisonment within these shallow, superficial, meaningless definitions, which then created a long, disgraceful history of actual experience that millions upon millions of people have suffered for no reason. So everyone who grew up in America eventually has to pursue self rehabilitation, deprogramming, repair, debugging, detoxification, just to try to undo all the damage that being American has done to them, just so they can try to be normal.
We've been sold this lie in regards to the West has the glitz and the glitz and the glamour in regards to that's where we need to be. Whatever lifestyle they're selling, that's how we should live. The foods that they're eating, the music agenda behind every artist who's basically producing a song. There's an agenda behind every music. We can see that happening right now. And understanding that the hip hop music industry has been created to basically moving drugs in and out of America, crimes and violence. That's what they're pushing, right? But when you listen to a song, some maybe not really go deeper into the lyrics into it, but even the video itself, it's selling a different agenda in regards to mostly how Africans should live the lifestyle they're selling to the African people. This is how an African should be a successful African man or woman should have this lifestyle. This is how they should talk. This is how they should dress. It has all been an agenda in regards to diminishing the African culture, the identity in regards to who is an African, right? Which most people, I know I was part of that also. I didn't really research in regards to the African history. And when you go back and do a lot of research in regards to who you are, where you come from, how you should represent yourself as an African individual, and why the US or the Europeans all over it always trying to fight and basically dominate the African people and African as a continent. It's because our mind, or basically there's a way our mind was colonized to basically see them as superior. And how would somebody, you can ask a question, how will somebody be like that? I've been asking that question since. It's because maybe they know, not even maybe, they understand who we are. They've seen who we were. And basically coming back from that, it means it's going to be their fault. If an individual understand who they are, if you know who you are, the power of identity, I've had a show about that, understanding who you are. I believe nobody can be able to put you down or downgrade you or basically try and side blind you in regards to your purpose also as an African individual or as a person, because you understand who you are, you understand where you came from, and you know your role in the society. You have the values that you're upholding as an African, and understanding that through you and also through the continent or basically where you come from, it means so much to you that it will not be indoctrinated in regards to other beliefs and values, which doesn't really sit right with you. Because we are always so in tune with our spirituality as Africans, but if we see the media, the West's media, or basically what they are always selling, it doesn't sit right with your spirituality, with your spirit. It's something that basically doesn't add up. And I believe there's a lot of research, or basically a lot of things we are always basically being shoved into our faces in the internet. And most of us as Africans or anybody, they don't really do a research. Like whatever is being sold to you, you're just gonna buy it, right? So we don't really research anything that is given to us, every product that is being sold to us, foods that are being imported into the country, which have basically meant to diminish the African people. But thank God for the strong immune system that we have as Africans. We're still here. The diseases, everything that are meant to basically diminish us or basically kill us, they do not. And as I always talk about I've been starting to talk about this more so about having an alkaline diet in people because it increases your basically puts your immune system in a very high level, makes you very super receptive to information. You're very in tune with your surrounding, with everything that goes on, and basically you're super in tune with your spirituality as African. I believe the reason why the US government always trying to censor African media is because they want us to be stagnated and still they do not want us to learn more about who we are. Learn more also about what they're doing and everything they're trying to sell to us. and this comes to the fact of maybe what the government is doing, what the economic sector, the social sector, the media sector in regards to the music industry that is doing. There's a lot behind everything that they sell to us. There's an agenda that they've been trying to push, and that's why they'll basically censor a lot of things that we're trying to research or Google, because we are not meant to be aligned or basically be woke in regards to learning or having more knowledge to what they're selling to us. We are meant to stay silly and stagnant and basically not be aware of anything. So whatever they throw at us, we'll definitely take it because they're not gonna question it. And because when people start questioning things, they start learning things which they do not know. And we understand a lot of people are there's so much fear with the unfamiliar, right? But the fact is, they always say you cannot put feelings into facts. A fact is a fact, whether you feel good or bad about whatever. It's a fact that Africa is the most powerful continent of the old time. It's a fact that Africans, or basically Africa, this is where life began. It's the cradle of life. The word is Alkelbulan. That's the word in regards to life started in Africa. The what do we call it? The cradle of life. This is where life began. This is a land of the Garden of Eden, where there's so much abundance into what we have. And I believe that's why we can see a lot of foreigners basically trying to dominate Africa. And if we stay stagnant in regards to information, not knowing what's going on, it's easier for them to access everything that we own.
To be American is to suffer from a multitude of chronic diseases. It's a condition, not a nationality. It's a condition that every serious and sincere person has to try to cure themselves of over the course of their adulthood. But for most of them, it's a terminal condition. They'll never get over it. They'll die that way. And the sickest part of it is that this condition, you're actually pressured to preserve it, to uphold it, to cherish it, rather than to abolish it. Just like your question, as if I'm doing something wrong by not basing my identity and my worldview and my understanding on the dysfunctional reductionist definition of white American. I mean, look, for most of the people who are categorized as Americans and who claim American history as their history, who feel some sort of, connection to the so-called founding fathers, Paul Revere and what have you, most of them only have even been over there for 2 or 3 generations. A smaller number than that's been over there for 4 generations, and very few, except for the descendants of slaves, have been over there since the beginning. The overwhelming majority of so-called Americans throughout most of American history, their families were somewhere else. It's the same with mine. The Irish side of my family came over during the potato famine, and the German side came over more recently than that. Yet for some reason, we're all supposed to believe that we are all somehow connected to the history and the cultural heritage of that country, connected to people that we're not connected to in any way whatsoever, as if they are our ancestors. They even call them our forefathers. What do I have to do with George Washington? America isn't a tribe. America is nothing but a blood-soaked piece of land that a ragtag horde of Europeans fled to escape Europe. And then it became a land that people fled to escape American foreign policy that pillaged their own countries. And the people that have undeniably been so-called American longer than 99% of so-called Americans, the descendants of African slaves, are still treated like outsiders in a country that they've been in longer than most people. They've been there at least as long as the most pedigreed aristocratic so-called Mayflower families. I mean, just on seniority alone, they're supposed to be among the highest status citizens of that country. Their ancestors sacrificed more by force and for more generations than anyone living in America today. But until now, they have to fight just to be given equal rights and equal opportunities on par with people who just got off the boat 3 generations ago, 2 generations ago, 1 generation ago, or yesterday. Let's not even talk about the indigenous people, because of course, let's not talk about them. They're never to be spoken of. But somehow we're all Americans. This abstract, fabricated identity that everyone is just supposed to believe in and unthinkingly adopt. Because if you didn't, you
That is so true. So that condition, the American condition in regards to how things should run and everything. Right now, the election are basically Kamala Harris, Trump. We can see what's literally going on. The fact that Kamala Harris can even fake her grandparents to just basically fit in, but understanding like the American condition, literally, we've seen how American as a nation has been viewed as one of the superpowers in the world. And going deeper into understanding the meaning of that, I believe there's so much things that maybe you would not even want to learn because it can be super not disturbing. I just said that though, in regards to why it is a superpower. But I believe if we start relearning about who we are as Africans and why the US government is always trying to censor African media, we'll understand how powerful we were, or basically how powerful we are as African people. We have also a conversation here that is going to make us understand deeper why the US government is trying to censor African media.
Stream, RT, all of which, and they claim that Africa Stream and so is somehow Russian and connected to RT secretly through intelligence links or whatever. But we can get into that. But I think to me the maybe underlying issue here of what the U.S. government has done in trying to restrict the operations of various Russian media and various independent media like Africa Stream is the assumption that somehow Africans in particular cannot think for themselves and that the positions and feelings that
I
people
definitely agree with what this gentleman is saying right now. There's that perception that they've actually created in their mindset because it's not what happens here in Africa or basically in Kenya, that we cannot think for ourselves and we need other countries to think for us. That's the ideologies and the perception that other nations have of Africa and Africans.
have all around the continent on whatever the issue may be, the war in Ukraine or the role of Russia and China in the world or whatever, is only happening because they're being secretly manipulated, which just seems massively paternalistic to me. But I wonder your thoughts on that question, David.
So I have two thoughts on that. And the first is, I find that entire concept to be, in addition to being disgustingly racist, I find it incredibly offensive. Personally, I take it very personal because, so I work with African Stream. I know the amount of effort that we put into what we actually put out. I know the amount of fact checking we do. I know the amount of technical accomplishment it takes to actually put out a piece of content, right? Because we have a thing in our newsroom that if you wouldn't want to watch it, then you shouldn't put it out there. Right. We put a lot of effort into what we do. And then to hear the I believe the number 5, was it number 6 citizen of the US coming on air to call us by name and basically reduce all of our hard work to Russian. He didn't even say they're funded by Russia or funded by RT. He said they're secretly run by RT, with the inference being that these guys are too stupid to even put out any of this stuff, to create any of this stuff on their own. It can only be the Russians. And there's a very long history of this sort of it's much more than just paternalistic thinking. There's a very long history of this incredibly boneheaded sort of thinking in the US. I personally trace it back as far back as the 19th century, where this fictitious ailment called drapetomania was invented. Uh, with the claim that any African wanting to be free was suffering from a mental illness, because as we well know, Africans have no human desire to be free. The natural position of an African is supposedly slavery. This happened again in 1930. This was at the peak of the Jim Crow era.
As I said earlier, there's that ideology about Africans cannot think for themselves because they view us as less, or basically, there's this ideology that they have, which is literally a lie. And they say if you believe a lie over and over and over, it becomes the truth to you. That's what your perception of truth is basically underlined from. And the fact that this individual is basically saying right now they have the understanding that Africans cannot think for themselves. And that's why we can see also we don't have a lot of manufacturing companies here, or basically industries, or in Kenya. And the some things we can really, really manufacture by ourselves or process by ourselves here. We have the land, we have amazing, amazing crops growing here, but we're still depending on a lot of things to be imported to us as coffee, which we produce coffee, honestly, doesn't really make sense. And I feel like that's a fact we come back from, or to the leaders that we're choosing, not even choosing, they're basically choosing for us. And we need leaders who have the best interest for the people and not being in this position for their selfish gain. But if you're being controlled, if you're being threatened, you'll basically do what you're being told to do. But also understanding that this is our nation, this is our country, and we have the power and the right to basically choose any leader that we want. We have the power and the right to say no to a lot of things that are being presented to us. We do have that power. And the fact that a lot of us as Africans, we're not ready to stand up for what's right, which is our land, our government, and basically the knowledge that is also being presented to us in the educational system, in the schools that our kids are going to, because it's going to be a cycle. And we, as we're learning this right now, I believe the fact that we know everything to do with what's happening right now in in the government, in the economic sector, the social sector, the industries, arts and entertainment, we can be able to change this and let not this cycle continue.
At a time where Africans, both in the diaspora and on the continent, where I believe in the US, the term was three-fifths of a human being. In Africa, we weren't even classified as humans. In some parts of the continent, like in Southern Africa, Africans were classified as flora and fauna. And in a place like Nigeria, where I come from, Nigeria wasn't even classified as a country under occupation. It was classified as a corporate object owned by the Queen. We're ruled by something called the Royal Niger Trading Company. And in the midst of all that, Africans on both sides of the Atlantic started uniting to.
Happy days, Jeeva Jabber. Hope you're doing better. How are you doing? How's your weekend? I can definitely see your comment here at Jeeva Jabber saying African nations are wealthy enough to launch a communication satellite. Problem solved. I definitely agree with you. He says press TV in Russia today are banned in the US and the EU. They use their own satellites and can be seen. I believe, and I basically second you in regards to what you've said about African nations are wealthy enough to launch a communication satellites. Yes, we are. And I feel like Jibber Jabber is the understanding like a lot of Africans do not know this, that we are wealthy, that we do not need help from other nations, like they actually need us to stand on their feet. Understanding what we have and what we can do by what we have, that's the light, actually, the bulb like turning on right now, you know? And it's amazing because we do not have this understanding. Few people, I did not have this understanding few years ago, which I believe a lot of us did not know because of what we are taught in school in regards to what the European nation did to us, which is a lie, right? But if we share such information every day, talking about this, voicing this, I believe the government can be able to do it, but they do not want to do this because they're definitely being controlled. So, how do we cross that bridge, Jipa Jabba? How do we cross that bridge?
RT.
I personally trace it back as far back as the 19th century, where this fictitious ailment called drapetomania was invented. Uh, with the claim that any African wanting to be free was suffering from a mental illness, because as we well know, Africans have no human desire to be free. The natural position of an African is
That's what has been indoctrinated into our minds, the inferiority complex that we cannot think for ourselves, that we do not want to be free. And I believe we should not be looking at anybody as superior because we are the greatest of all time. Like people or other nations, as I've said earlier, since I started this show, cannot move forward in their social economic sectors without Africa, right?
supposedly slavery. This happened again in 1930. During this was at the peak of the Jim Crow era, at a time where Africans, both in the diaspora and on the continent, where I believe in the US, the term was 3/5 of the human
Whatever you say, press TV is Iranian, alrighty.
being. In Africa, we weren't even classified as humans. In some parts of the continent, like in Southern Africa, Africans were classified as flora and fauna. And in a place like Nigeria, where I come from, Nigeria wasn't even classified as a country under occupation. It was classified as a corporate object owned by the Queen. We're ruled by something called the Royal Niger Trading Company. And in the midst of all that, Africans on both sides of the Atlantic started.
We should stop presenting ourselves to these European countries as we need help, as victims, because we are not victims at all. And we see our leaders doing this, presenting themselves as victims, as Africa needs help. We don't need help. I believe we have everything that we have more, and we can basically redefine our nations, our countries, or the continent. But the way we see our leaders presenting our countries to the European nations as we need help, but we do not need help. Even the money or the wealth that they have right now, it's because of the African continent, literally. But that pity patty ideologies that people have about Africa, it's not it. It's a lie. It's a lie, literally. And I believe the leaders that we have right now should stop presenting themselves as victims to the European nation because it's super sad and super pathetic.
Uniting to come up with some sort of Pan-Africanist thinking. And the US government said it's the Soviets that are behind it. In the 1960s, during the African independence era, which coincided with the civil rights movement, because they were both joined at the hip, it was the same thing. Martin Luther King is a Russian agent. Kwame Nkrumah is a Russian agent. Patrice Lumumba, Fred Hampton, you guys are all Russian agents. In 1980s,
I definitely agree with you, Jeeper Jabber. He said it's not a belief, it's a fact. Yeah, it is a fact that Africa is the most wealthiest nation of all time, that Africa is the most powerful continent of all time, that we have more than enough. Good morning, good afternoon, General Mosquito. How are you doing? That we do not need help from other nations. They need help from Africa. And I say, Jeeper Jabber saying, but you have to have a FU attitude. I definitely stand and agree with you, but you gotta have self-respect first. I of course that comes first. Self-respect and self-realization of who you are, that you do not need help from any European nation or people, that we should stop this organization coming to help Africa, this charity organization coming to help Africa. No, it comes with everything that Jibber Jabber said right now. You gotta have self respect first, relearn about your history, relearn about your identity, relearn about the kings and the queens who were ruling Africa and the kingdoms that we have and the wealth that we had. Then Munsa Mansa was the most wealthiest African individual of all time, and they needed him actually to trade goods and services. They needed Munsa Mansa. How about that?
five, the apartheid head of prime minister of South Africa claimed that blacks are happy in South Africa under apartheid, and the only blacks who aren't happy are those who have had Russian ideas pushed into their heads. So it's like we're in 2024, and this same thing is being rinsed again. That without the involvement of this Russian subversive funding or indoctrination, whatever, these group of people, black people, are just too fundamentally stupid to have any positions, any ideologies,
Mm-hmm.
any voices, any thoughts of their own. They can only do something when there's the hand of Vladimir puppeting them.
It's really incredible. It's so paternalistic and, like you said, racist. I also thought it was interesting in this New York Times article announcing.
He said something powerful. It basically took my mind back into the reason why the US is offering Africa a seat on the UN Security Council, which basically they did not do years. Why after 80 years? Why offering Africa a seat on the UN Security Council, right? And the fact that the ideology that they had about that, like we have nothing to give, we don't have anything great to contribute into this UN Security Council. And it's amazing. I believe a lot of the conversation or the meeting that they have concerns Africa. Why did we not have any African individual representing us in the UN Security Council? Because they have the ideology like actually cannot think for ourselves. We need them to think for us. And now they're basically offering Africa a seat at the UN Security after 80 years.
After Anthony Blinken's speech, that they would be putting these sanctions, these new sanctions on, like, basically RT, classifying it as Russian intelligence. Um, and this speaks to the broader issue of just trying to muzzle any media that isn't US controlled. I'm going to quote from the New York Times. They said, the goal of the sanctions and diplomacy is to alert countries where RT remains a popular source of global news, including in many parts of Africa, the Middle East, and South America, to the potential for Russian influence campaigns against governments that fall out of the Kremlin's favor. So, of course, on top of accusing this or that outlet that's popular, that's saying, that's pushing out anti-imperialist ideas, is all Russian backed, there is this also clear fear of any kind of media that isn't giving a U.S. government perspective on things. And I'm just curious your thoughts on that, because as we see these geopolitical shifts around the world, you do see a lot of people in global South countries really changing their views of the U.S. based on the U.S.'s own behavior, not because Russia's telling them to.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the classic behavior of a dying empire, if you like. When a star is in the process of turning into a supernova, is at its most dangerous, and is at its most irrational. That's what the U.S. is doing. We've seen this in so many ways, not just in Africa, but it seems like it's a recurring motif in pretty much everything the U.S. does with its foreign policy now, where in trying to accomplish one goal, which is to hobble the other guy, it ends up indirectly strengthening the other guy. So, for example, when it tried to, I believe the Secretary of Trade, Janet Yellen, said in her own words that the goal was to hobble China, to stop China from accessing the ability to manufacture a certain type of chips. Guess what? China simply went ahead and found a way. And now, um, based on the crazy stunts that this great ally of the US that shall remain unnamed pulled yesterday, half of the world is going to be pivoting toward Chinese chips and Chinese electronics, right? So they've essentially sanctioned their own companies. They did the same thing with the sanctions on Russia. They effectively sanctioned Russia. They sanctioned Western suppliers because now they don't have access to Russia's markets. Russia simply pivoted toward China. And
Is it amazing the fact that this is actually very funny in regards to how the European or other world nations view Africa? The most disturbing thing, or not even disturbing, literally, it's just the most ironic thing, super funny to me, is the fact that I'm still going back to the fact that the US basically supports two permanent UN Security Council seats for Africa. Two, right? Now that's happening right now after all those years. And the understanding that we cannot think for ourselves as Africans, that we need someone else to think for us or to basically give us condition of what we should eat, what we should listen to, what we should research. It's very domineering and undergrading. We cannot keep taking all this as Africans, literally. We cannot be taking everything that is basically shoved in our faces. And it's literally in our faces. It's not even hidden at all. And also a lot of Africans trying to prove a point to a lot of European nations or individual. You don't need to prove a point at all. There's no point to prove at all.
Or the suppliers. So Russian consumers and the Russian economy is not suffering, but Western interests are suffering. So effectively, they've sort of self-sanctioned, and they're doing the exact same thing in Africa all over again, where
Thank you, everybody, joining me on YouTube. Super appreciating your presence here on the Black Hot Fire Network. And everybody joining me on TikTok, thank you so much for the guys who are joining me right now. I've been talking about the fact that why is the US government trying to censor African media? That's the topic of the day. And guys listening to me on X, on the network, that's the topic of the day. Why is the US government trying to censor African media? I can see Jibber Jabbers has 80% of the market, America 10% computer chips, thanks to politicians offshoring industry. And then he says, if in the Security Council, they won't have veto status. So it's a useless position. Thank you so much. It's a useless position because maybe they just need their presence there to basically make themselves feel better. Like, okay, yeah, we have African representative in the US, in the UN Council, Security Council, to make them feel better. But they don't have any veto power or status to basically come up with any amendment for that to be pushed, then it's basically a useless position. And even though they've given two positions, two permanent positions to the African people at the seat, still, if they do not have any veto status, I don't think there's need for them to be there. It's a security council, security. So why is before they did this, why did not think of putting any African individual there? We definitely know why, and that's we're talking about it right now.
instead of trying to show that, okay, if we claim that what narratives being put out by the likes of African Stream are wrong, they're not accurate, that the US is actually a force for good in Africa, this is the evidence, this is what we're doing. Instead of trying to do that, it's, oh, let's ban them. Let's stop people from having access to them. And they don't seem
But
to
that
realize.
has been the agenda in regards to the European nations to basically diminish Africans and take over Africa. Africa is where the world is. Africa is where all the minerals and resources, which are basically manufacturing everything that they have, comes from Africa. So if you can have Africa without the Africans, that's a done deal for them.
Realize that by doing that, they're just proving our point even further. Because what business it would have been different if Blinken had said we are restricting access to African Stream in the US. US citizens shouldn't see it. That's fine. That's America's prerogative to determine what Americans get to see, right? Because Americans have electoral control over who gets to decide
And
those things.
first of all, why are we always learning about everything to do with Americans and other nations? Why are we learning about everything to do with Americans and Europeans? They don't know anything about us, right? We also have the right to say, no, I don't want to learn about, is it Vasco da Gama? I don't really care about, how is it helping me right now, honestly? How about I learn about the African history, about who I am, about where I came from, about what we have in Africa, like who led Africa, who are the kings and the queens, right? The resources that we have. Why cannot that information be pushed so hard into our educational system, but we are learning everything that does not regard who we are?
Things for them. But then you are standing in DC and making decisions effectively on behalf of an entire continent. So you are telling a platform like Meta, which has billions of users across the world, to deplatform a news organization based in Nairobi, Kenya. Right? So millions of people, literally millions of people across the continent and across.
He mentioned literally my country right now. Let's go back into that.
And making decisions effectively on behalf of an entire continent. So you are telling a platform.
That's how we recurred in their minds. We're like kids, literally, clapping for our boss. Kids, they basically say we have our chat-like mind, Africans, which is what they view of us, and that's why they're making decisions for us. Africans, we should wake up and literally start making moves.
like Meta, which has billions of users across the world, to deplatform a news organization based in Nairobi, Kenya. Right? So millions of people, literally millions of people across the continent and across the world who follow African Stream have essentially had that taken away from them by some sort of imperial diktat from Washington. And that only proves the point the US. US citizens shouldn't see it. That's fine. That's America's prerogative to determine what Americans get to see, right? Because Americans have electoral control over who gets to decide those things for them. But then you are standing in DC and making decisions effectively on behalf of an entire
The
continent.
audacity, like you're making decisions for us, honestly. It's downgrading. Why are we allowing other nations to make decisions for us? Can we not do that? Honestly, guys, I believe as Africans, some of us are basically moving along with your day to day life, not understanding that we're being controlled. You might not say this does not concern me until it concerns you, as the finance bill did. You'll understand you have a role to play in this nation, in your country, in what you're eating, whatever food that you're eating, are you checking into that? Whatever information that you're basically absorbing every day or basically consuming, are you checking into that? What your kid is learning or kids are learning in school, are you checking into that? Because it's something, the information, whatever they're learning about who they are, whatever they're viewing, whatever they're eating, it's basically molding them to be a certain individual in the future, literally. And you cannot continue. When you think about maybe your kids in the future generation, it will make you upset. And also understanding also you also learned about this and it's all been a lie. It makes you upset. It makes you say something without being fearful of anything that will happen because I believe people really fear the unfamiliar. But it is fact. For me, it has taken a long time for me to process a lot of things. I'm still processing a lot of things right now. It'll take some time, but I'm stepping into the truth, pole pole.
Continent. So you are telling a platform like Meta, which has billions of users across the world, to deplatform a news organization based in Nairobi, Kenya. Right? So millions of people, literally millions of people across the continent and across the world who follow African Stream have essentially
I can see Jibber Jabber on the comments going back at it. You're saying the UN can say that the UN can say that our black friend we aren't racist. Okay, off topic. Yeah, I believe she's doing okay. She's doing better. I believe maybe she's not be okay like that, but she's okay. I hope she didn't eat that. Sound like you stopped Bible study, Jibber Jabber. Alrighty. Still doing Bible study, but I'm still work in regards to a lot of information about the African history, identity, and everything that we learn here. Jibber Jabber said the same was said by your slave owners. They're like our children, really.
had that taken away from them by some sort of imperial diktat
So basically,
from
we are like their children because we cannot think for ourselves and make very substantial principled decisions. They need to do that. Is it like the other way around, literally? Because I believe we are the start of civilization started from Africa. So how can we be like children being taught and decisions being made on our behalf? I believe everything was taken away from us and intertwined to be like they are the ones who started civilization, which they did not, because we can see that right now. And I believe everything is coming into the light and being shown in regards to understanding where civilization started from.
Washington. And that only proves the point that we have constantly tried to make, that the US is an empire. It behaves like an empire. These are the actions of an imperialist.
An empire actually running or basically being pushed by the agenda of crime and violence, right?
And they just can't seem to stop themselves.
One of the things I'm curious your thoughts about in just terms of, the why this moment and why now. I mean, do you feel that they're worried, the United States, that is, that they're losing control of Africa?
It's an empire with a foundation of lies and anything wicked you can think of.
I mean, I think one thing about Africa Stream is it's, produced by younger Africans. It's very on the pulse of younger Africans, the movements that are happening all across the continent, the questions that people are talking about. I mean, do you think there's an element of fear here, not just of what people may do if they are able to access news sources like Africa Stream and others, but what they're already doing, and the fact that Africans and younger Africans are producing their own media to reflect their own experiences, which are obviously, it seems to me at least,
Jibber jabber, I saw that. I saw that.
moving in a different direction than where America and Europe might like.
I believe that's exactly the problem. What they've been used to is being able to operate almost sort of
There's a book called Africa in Crisis, guys. Guys who are joining me on TikTok, live on YouTube, you should definitely go digger into that book, Africa in Crisis, and basically tells you about why Africa is still poor and why we've never moved on from the system with the leaders that we have.
unopposed in Africa, because for the longest time, the biggest problem Africa faced was there was a huge asymmetry in global information. So, as you may or may not know, the entire, pretty much something like 90 something percent of Africa's digital satellite television market, for example, is dominated by a single company. It used to be South African. It's now owned by Canal Plus, which is a French company. So essentially, an entire continent's digital television is now owned by some guy in Paris, right? And it used to be owned by some white guy in Joburg, right? So there used to be this sort of very tight control over what information gets into the heads of Africans. So in 2022, for example, when the decision was made to sanction RT, stop RT from broadcasting in Europe and the
Yes. But the main question is like, why Africa? Why mostly Africa? Will that not make you really question and also go back into like, why Africa? Because they know what Africa is. They know what Africa upholds as a continent. They know how Africans are wired. So it'll make you question like, why Africa? Because they know what they know, and I believe we know what we know in regards to, if you really go back to the African history and really learn about the African history and identity and who you are, who you were, and what your continent upholds, you basically understand why is the US government trying to censor the African media.
US. RT, as you may or may
General Mosquito, hi, why indeed? Yes, why indeed? I know you know why.
not know, was also stopped from broadcasting across Africa, even though Africa had no business with any of that. Africa was not involved in the sanctions package on the Russians, but because the
Jabber is saying paternalistic property mindset. I definitely agree with you. With the mindset, while yes, that's for sure.
RT feed that fed MultiChoice, which is the sort of monopoly.
We're almost coming to the end of Let's Pop with Iriton today. This is a beautiful Monday. Remember to download our app on Google Store to get our amazing app on the network. You'll basically be listening to us every time, everywhere, whenever. It's free on Google Store. And also on the app, you'll find the store section where another page will appear, another tab will appear, the BHFN Sports Store. In it, you'll find a beautiful page with beautiful, amazing, healthy supplements that will help you guys, the guys who are working out, the likes of General Mosquito, the likes of Iriton on their journey, growing their hair, glowing skin, stronger nails. Run to the app and order one for your loved one, one for yourself, for your husband, for your wife, and they'll have a happy day and continue to listening to the best radio station, the Black Hot Fire Network. You'll find amazing, empowering conversation in regards to what matters most, the African history, identity, and basically why is the US government trying to censor African media?
On the African continent came from a European supplier, and the European supplier had to follow EU sanctions. That happened, basically. So effectively, you've had one guy in Washington switching, turning switches on and off for 2 billion people. or so, which absolutely should not be the case. But now, because of the rise of the internet and social media and the use of social media by platforms like African Stream, which, as you know, even though it has a native website, it focuses almost exclusively on social media platforms, right? Which is why it's so influential. We've been able to leverage that and get this message out to people. And for the first time, people are seeing that this is not just like some airy fairy ivory tower narrative that some Cornel West type person says.
It's happening, guys. It's happening. There's some powerful people somewhere in the boardroom making decisions for us, planning what's gonna happen tomorrow, next week, in regards to the African continent. So you better stay woke. You better do your research. You better start voicing out everything that is wrong. And we're basically coming to an end of Let's Talk with Iriton. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me here on TikTok, on YouTube, X, and listening on the network. Thank you, Jibber Jabber, for basically joining me this beautiful Monday. I appreciate your presence. I hope you're doing better. We'll continue this on Wednesday on Let's Talk with Iriton. Remember, as I always say, you are the change you need to see in the world. Jibber Jabber is saying, build your own boardroom. Definitely. That's basically a good point. Let's build our own boardroom and basically make decisions for ourselves. We cannot just sit around and let people somewhere in whatever boardroom they are make decisions for us, because this is our land, this is our country, this is our continent, and we have every bloody right to basically define it as we want it. It's time for us to take back our power and everything that has been stolen from us. That has been it here with me, the Marvel Iriton, and let's hope Iriton. Take care. Remember, do not let anybody dim your light. Stay strong. And always remember, you are the change you need to see in the world. See you later on Rhythm Scoop. And let's continue this on Wednesday. Remember to basically subscribe to all our social media platform to find amazing, uplifting conversation in regards to what matters most, because we are always redefining Africans as we redefine ourselves. Stay strong, stay blessed, and have a good one. Take care.
Yes, man, say Wagwan. Andrew Robinson is with your brother there. Reaching out to all the massive African continent. And it's really good. All the
Rudy, Rudy. Rooted now. My seeds be deep now. Me rooted in the melody.
Remember, guys, to eat your alkaline foods. Remember the alkaline diet of vegetables and fruits every day. Remember to have a fruit every day to increase your melanin.
Young girl, stay rooted. I don't plant my seeds down, rooted. Brown skin popping, I'm rooted. ATL bread, I'm rooted. Rooted, nappy head, rooted. All my songs come with melody. Got the heart, got the soul like Harriet. A queen since she born, that was evident. That's evident.
Jabba is saying, build that wall, fight. That's what's up. It's about to get down.
A black excellence. I can tell a good dog when I'm petting him. Know that if I have his tribe, he protecting them. Mother of a child of God, I invest in them. Nutrition and brown milk in them. Young Rosa, young Luther, keep marching. Floodgates coming over, don't stop them. I know that life, it ain't easy. Your life, it matters, believe me. Roll out the fakes and the frauds. It's hiding behind a facade. Young girl, stay rooted. I don't plant my seeds, now I'm rooted. Brown skin popping, I'm rooted. You pull the hood out me, I'm rooted. Rooted, nappy head, rooted. I don't plant my seeds, now I'm rooted. Brown skin popping, I'm rooted. ATL bread, I'm rooted. Rooted, nappy head, rooted. All my rules stay embedded in hard work, let them know ain't no trending it. Popping off on the charts, that's a better win than popping off in the streets, ain't no checking it. I can tell a good dog when I'm petting him. Know that if I have his tribe, he protecting them. Mother of a child of God, I invest in them. Nutrition and brown milk in them. Young Rosa, young look, they keep marching. Floodgates coming, no, it don't stop 'em. I know that life, it ain't easy. Your life, it matters, believe me. Roll out the face and the front. It's hiding behind a facade. Young girls, stay rooted. I done plant my seeds, now I'm rooted. Brown skin popping, I'm rooted. He pull the hood out me, I'm rooted. Rooted, nappy head rooted. I done plant my seeds, now I'm rooted. Brown skin popping, I'm rooted. ATL bread, I'm rooted. Rooted, nappy head rooted.